Welcome to Don't Quit Your Day Job, a podcast about four guys who have no business thinking anyone will care about what they say. My name's Jeff.
I'm Edison.
I'm RJ.
And I'm Joshua.
On today's podcast, we're going to be discussing Justice League, DC's big combination to their cinematic universe. And we're going to be talking about what works in the film, what doesn't work in the film, what we think will happen for future films in the franchise, and what could possibly happen to directors Zack Snyder and Joss Whedon.
So I think to start off, I think we all noticed it's almost like it's split into two films. The first half, you can see it's basically a Zack Snyder film, and about an hour, maybe an hour and 20 minutes in, it gets this like almost light, childish nature, kind of similar to the original Avengers that we see with Joss Whedon. I was just wondering, what are your guys' takes on that?
Well, do we want to do the bad stuff out of the way first, so that way we can?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's get the bad
Also,
stuff.
most of the movie got it. Besides like a few redeeming scenes.
Shitty world building. Shitty world building. Let's go.
Well, I think we can kind of see. I think they did a really good job in the sense that we can't tell what the reshoots are, but it's very oblivious in the Aquaman stuff, in the kind of like Arctic town that Bruce Wayne kind of navigates through that whole scene, and it's got reshot shot for shot. But my problems with the film are like what Jeff just said. World building. If the point of the film was to kind of rush it through, we kind of see the negative aspects of it, because we're kind of thrown all these different concepts and characters all together into one 2-hour movie that you don't really get time to explore any of it, and it's just kind of like thrown together. It feels like so. It definitely feels as though we're going to probably in future generations kind of take it slow. I think my hope would be that they would, and take their time in introducing different characters, different concepts within the DCEU, and try to build towards a second Justice League movie.
I mean, just going off of that, like you said the other day, we know who Steppenwolf is, but it's almost guaranteed 80% or more of the audience have no clue why they should fear Steppenwolf and why any of this should matter.
Yeah, what his exile is, why he's there, what the hell Unity is, and who the hell Mother is, because right now he just sounds like a whiny little bitch.
Mentions the fact that he's been exiled once, and that's supposed to be a reference to the outer universe that they're trying to build up as a threat. Not to mention the fact that we're not given a reason to fear Steppenwolf. First off, his name's stupid and they pronounce it way too emphatically. Second off, he gets the shit beaten out of him by everybody, and it's not even funny.
I think in terms of like comeuppance and all that, and just kind of like who the character is, they took some liberties here, and I'm a little disappointed, especially. And I'm going to give you a. We're doing spoiler free, or can we?
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing.
Let's go about 10 or 15 minutes spoiler free, and then we can get into spoilers after that and give a warning to the audience.
Well then I'll just leave my complaints for Steppenwolf.
Okay.
For later, but yeah, the way they went about this, it just feels very ham-fisted, and it definitely doesn't feel like someone who took their time trying to construct a $300 million movie.
Only $300. Yeah,
that makes sense.
It has a lot of the same issues that the beginning of Suicide Squad had, where it feels like it's trying to stitch together everything really quickly and really fast, and trying to throw the plot at you instead of building upon it.
I feel like if we went into this movie knowing more backstory about Aquaman, The Flash, like if we'd had movies building up to it like the Avengers movie did, this would have been a totally different movie. Like even if it was literally the exact same thing on the screen, with all that,
the characters had character development, so who they were as people, rather than like being confused whether they were mopey little bitches depending on who directed, and then like they had a personality depending on the other director.
Yeah, it kind of felt like some of the scenes were kind of unnecessary. Almost like the Barry Allen stuff with his dad. It's kind of like, what does it do to further advance the story of Justice League in regards to them assembling the team, their conflict with Steppenwolf, and trying to make sure that he doesn't gain all the mother boxes. It just kind of feels like out of place and not really doesn't really advance the story.
I think that was them rushing in that backstory that we should have gotten in a Flash solo movie.
This all comes back to the fact that they were trying to rush to catch up with Marvel, and that's not going to work.
Yes, I mean, even with the Steppenwolf scenes, I feel like the Amazons, the introduction of the Atlanteans, that could have all been, after credit scenes. Like, oh, hey, after Aquaman's big climactic battle, what happened? Oh, snap, Steppenwolf's got the other mother box. Oh, hey, Wonder Woman, what's this? The Amazons have, gone back to their kingdom, and it's like, oh, hey, Steppenwolf has the other MacGuffin type, piece to this universe, and it's just kind of like they forced in a lot of stuff that didn't necessarily need to be in there, but because they're trying to make some sort of coherent sense with the film, and the fact that they really underhanded themselves with a 2-hour time limit here. I feel like if there was one film that
should have had like a 2.5-hour, 3-hour movie, it would have been this one.
It should have been this film. The idea that Suicide Squad, is 2.5 hours long, but that we're going to go an hour 58 into Justice League, it just feels wrong. This is their big climactic kind of like conclusion to the somewhat type of story that they're trying to tell through BVS, Man of Steel, Wonder Woman, going into this. So definitely, I think we need to kind of take our time in introducing characters and concepts throughout the next slate of films that are going to come out post Justice League.
In addition to it needing to be longer to fill in that gap of knowledge that we need to be connected to the world and connect to the characters, it also needs to not be directed by the mopey asshole. It needs to be directed by Whedon.
How many scenes do you think were cut and will be added in the DVD of the film? Because really, that could solve a lot of the issues we have on it, and with the runtime, just let them add.
My problem with that is I shouldn't have to buy.
I'm not defending it or anything. Right. I'm asking, do you think this movie will substantially be better on DVD?
If you buy Batman vs Superman on Blu-ray and you get the extra half hour, it makes it a coherent story, and it's actually decent. I don't believe you. But you shouldn't have to pay $20 when it comes out on Blu-ray to make that happen.
See, I think this comes down heavily to what scenes were cut out and whether or not they were done well enough to make up for that. I mean, on the merit of it being a theatrical release, it falls flat coming to the story and coming to world building. But as whether or not they actually had a coherent story when they were filming it, and that just got cut for time, and because of, I don't know, whoever the fuck told them to cut it, is a different story.
Well, I mean, we're kind of having this conversation of, what we'll see in DVD extras, but from what I've been reading, it doesn't necessarily seem that there's going to be a director's cut of this film.
I know Joss Whedon doesn't like director's cuts a lot of the time, so.
Which makes this even more brutal, the fact that there might be things that are on the cutting room floor that could make this movie feel more fleshed out and more coherent of a film.
I think moving forward, they should just take the good aspects of this film and worry about their next movies. I'm not so much worried. Like, I've already seen Justice League, so even if half an hour of extra content came out, it wouldn't totally change my opinion of the movie. I feel like just take the good aspects of this film and move on to The Flash, move on to Aquaman. Aquaman in this movie is actually something I wanted to talk about. He kind of gave me some hope for the universe going forward. I really enjoyed a lot of what Aquaman did in this movie. It was kind of like Aquaman's always been the butt of the joke of the DC universe, but they made Aquaman into one of the most badass characters that I've seen in quite a while, actually. I know Edison agreed with me.
Yeah, no, I'm very much looking forward to what happens in Arthur Curry's world and kind of the interactions that he has. He's a very energetic kind of character, and you want to kind of see what happens next for him, and especially the Wonder Woman scene with the lasso and him, it really kind of gives him some like gravity to his character and kind of makes it kind of like, oh, here there's a personality behind the dude bro kind of persona that we get for a good portion of the film, and he's a character that definitely look forward to.
He really reminded me of the way what they've turned Thor into. Honestly, they almost feel like the same character.
He is essentially the Thor, but the key part for his movie is that they're going to need a lot more of those scenes, a lot more of those lasso scenes. They're going to need to build his character up even more. Because the lasso scene was a good scene. It was a very funny scene.
Yeah, let's just wrap the lasso around him constantly.
No, it was a good scene and it was a good character scene, but that by itself isn't quite enough to build his character, and if he's going to have a standalone movie, they're going to have to be able to repeat that on a grander scale.
I see what you're saying. Like, they could fall into the trap of Thor 1 and 2, where there isn't enough humor in the movie for it to be a movie you want to rewatch over and over.
The shitty love interest.
If they combine, if they go the Thor Ragnarok route and they combine him being badass with that humor on occasion, then it could really be something special if they get the right screenwriter and director.
Thor Ragnarok also had the added bonus of having good foil characters to go along with it. It also didn't have a shitty love interest. I will not beat that horse enough. That fucking love interest. I don't even know who was the actress for that in the first two Thor movies.
Natalie Portman, and the fact that you keep forgetting her name is honestly offensive. She is the queen of Naboo, goddammit.
Granted, the writing for those films, the first two were anything to laud over, but it'll be interesting. I think you see it with Wonder Woman, and you saw it in Man of Steel. Granted, controversial decisions in that film, be damned. But I think you really have to have heart in some of these films, and the idea that Superman versus Batman was such a dark and depressing kind of film that kind of sucks the heart out of some of these characters. I think what you really need going forward is, especially with a concept like Atlantis, is to just go all in on it and just kind of like show us this world of Atlantis and kind of explore it with us as an audience and kind of make us invested into why Arthur cares about Atlantis so much, why we should care as well. And I think, with James Wan, he's a very action-packed, kind of fun director, and I think that he'll be able to get that kind of world-building, kind of fun aspect of Aquaman and bring it to life.
James Wan is the guy who made Fast and Furious 7, right?
He did the new Fast. Yeah,
right. I remember that because I remember whenever he was picked to be that director, I was very upset because I am not really a fan. I don't know if he necessarily has the chops to do a Thor Ragnarok type of movie.
Honestly, I think we need to be Thor Ragnarok. I think you need to with this character. You have a world that's worth exploring and characters that can be brought to life in a way that we haven't necessarily seen in either kind of cinematic universe. Concept of underwater. That's a thing that we haven't necessarily had a chance to play with. I think that could be a real good advantage for DC in trying to differentiate themselves and create characters that are memorable and that people want to go flock to the movies to go see.
Yeah, we have a new environment to work with using Atlantis and Aquaman. But this kind of comes down to something else I mentioned before in our first attempt at doing this podcast, was that this might not be a popular opinion, but I think DC would benefit from going a different direction. Not that I didn't enjoy the humor in these fucking Justice League, but I think they would benefit from taking a somewhat more serious route in some of the subjects, kind of like what they did in Suicide Squad, but not garbage.
See, I don't think there's a way to do that. I think you just described a way to do garbage without making it garbage.
They can do that.
You see, leading up to Batman v Superman, there was literally a rule inside Warner Brothers that these movies weren't allowed to have jokes. That they had to be this dark of movies. Yeah, these were literally rules.
Jokes are a thing you need in dark movies, though. It's like how you contrast.
I feel like when you're saying these movies need to take a darker approach, I think some of them can, but we still need to have those movies
Aquaman, by itself, I don't necessarily think should necessarily take a dark approach because it's the world of Atlantis, and we've already established Aquaman as more of a big
thing. Like, let's move into some spoilers here. just to warn.
Oh, have we not already gone into spoilers?
Not
We've
really.
already talked
we
about
haven't
scenes.
spoiled the end or anything.
I guess.
So just a warning in case. I think on the topic of serious and not serious, they really fixed the Batman v Superman problem of Superman being way too dark, as well as Man of Steel, where he's just snapping General Zod's neck.
I think so when we're talking about the whole serious, non-serious thing, I think what we're missing, so we need to take this kind of back a couple of years, right? So we're looking at, while Marvel's kind of, slow burning this cinematic universe into existence, DC essentially had a couple of franchises. They had Batman and they had Green Lantern before we had Man of Steel, right? So you got a franchise, and I think what people tend to misinterpret about Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy is that that it's this kind of dark and brooding kind of subject matter, but that's because it's Batman. And I think what a lot of people tend to miss out in those films, though, is that those films have a lot of heart, kind of levity, hope, optimism, and kind of hopefulness to them. And with Batman vs. Superman, we got none of that. We got a character who was very much on the edge, about no hopefulness to him whatsoever, and it's very dreary, dark, kind of almost like nihilistic to a sense. And when you take characters like Wonder Woman and Superman and you put them in that kind of environment, it really takes away from the optimism, the idealism, and the kind of just wonderfulness of those two characters. They're very, out of the, into the sunlight, kind of like what we as people strive to be kind of type characters. And even with Batman, it kind of pushed it to a certain extent. So I think what we need to do is, I don't necessarily think they need to go completely total like humor, like, oh hey, it's a joke-a-palooza. I think you can balance. I think what you really need to focus on is that you take the character seriously, and that's the thing that Nolan did best with Batman, was that he took the mythology and he treated it like a true mythology, and took his characters seriously. These were do or die kind of stakes for each character in this franchise, and so you need to do that with your characters going forward. Because let's be honest, let's say the Suicide Squad, when your director is not only directing the movie but writing the movie, and David Ayer, and he's going, and his interpretation of some of these characters are like, hey, I don't really have an interest in comic book kind of aspects of the film. I want to do a kind of like a South Central LA kind of gang style film, and you are taking characters that are very fantastic and just kind of out there, kind of wonder creating characters, and you're putting them into like this box of like gritty realism that necessarily doesn't apply to them.
Let's not give Suicide Squad too much credit. It wasn't exactly didn't exactly get the gritty realism right either.
Oh no! I agree. No, it doesn't do that. It doesn't even do that right. But the fact is that the approach that David Ayer was taking with Suicide Squad was one that should not have been taken to begin with.
In the process of trying to give his characters a new light, he also didn't fully embrace his new vision for the characters, and they kind of just watered them down to a point where they didn't have any character.
Yeah, because you're doing what's the guy's name? What's the Flames?
Diablo.
Yeah, you got Diablo kind of doing like this LA gangster thing, and then you've got on one side, and you've got like a character like Killer Croc, who's like just so
doesn't talk at all and has no character.
It's like so abnormally like comic booky. It's just kind of like you got a clash of styles that just it doesn't make sense. And then you're taking Joker, Harley Quinn, and it's just like
that hurt me more than I care to admit.
Killer
Croc is one of my favorite characters, just for how just unnecessarily brutal he is as a person, and like how flawed he is as a character. That kid's psychological trauma that led to the person that he is, and they didn't even mention that to begin with, honestly hurt me. He is a perfectly fleshed out character in the comic books, and they just chose to make him something disgusting.
He didn't. Like, I feel like the fact that they couldn't like tie his character into the theme they were going for with the gangster sort of thing they were going for is the reason why he doesn't talk in that movie at all. Is the reason they have him in the background of every scene is because they couldn't find a way to actually make his comic book character meld.
It's another thing where they throw these characters together with no build up. There was just the same as it is in Justice League. They threw all of these characters together, and again, we know who they are, but there's a lot of people who are confused as to who they are in general, and we're just angry that they messed up their backstories, whereas other people didn't know their backstories to begin with.
I'm the trashy characters.
Yeah,
I'm more mad that they didn't do anything good with the characters they were given. They had the option of going off the backstories they were given and building more character into it, or trying to do their own version, and they did neither.
Speaking of that, that brings me back to Steppenwolf. My God, did they screw the pooch on this one? How do you how do you essentially, because, I mean, if you've seen the movie or you don't care for spoilers, they essentially move on from, like, the New Gods, Old Gods, Mother Boxes, Steppenwolf, all that kind of concept stuff, and now they're going straight into, like, Injustice Gang, Legion of Doom kind of territory going forward. But, I mean, you had an opportunity where it's like, if you were going to use the Mother Boxes, the concepts of the New Gods, and the Parademons and all that, why not just go all out and just bring in Darkseid?
Besides mentioning his name for 2 seconds.
Did they even mention
They
Darkseid?
did.
When
Steppenwolf, it wasn't the last time we saw Steppenwolf, but it was like 2 times before the last time we saw Steppenwolf. He just said the word Darkseid, and then it faded out to another scene.
Didn't even remember that.
Wow.
Completely whiffed it.
Yeah.
But, I understand why they want to avoid Darkseid to a certain extent, because he is a very Thanos-type character. They don't want to, they don't want to make that connection immediately.
He's the build-up character.
The point being is...
So then, my thing is that, man, you have Lex Luthor in Batman vs. Superman. Why not introduce the Injustice Gang or the Legion of Doom first, and then work your way to Parademons, Darkseid, and all that kind of New Gods kind of concepts? But, I mean, either way, they were screwed to begin with because of the similarities between Darkseid and Thanos. But if you were going to do that, you might as well should have beaten Marvel to the punch in introducing that type of character. Or either that or just save it and put it on the shelf for a later time. Because now it's like you've introduced all these concepts, but they're so tainted and bad, no one really cares to use them. And you waste a really good opportunity with really high concept, really like spectacular kind of imagery and characters that they've just kind of pushed aside now. Now we're going to move on to our Luthor arc and just kind of like Legion of Doom and stuff like that. Which I think if they put the cards right, they can fix a lot of this. I think if you're going to do Injustice Gang / Legion of Doom, every film going forward, if you're going to make this a real threat to Justice League going into the sequel, you need to make every villain we see in these films going forward compelling. They need to be a real threat to the characters so that when they do decide, hey, we are going to team up and we're going to take it to them, it feels like a real threat.
Which actually, I'm going to go back to Steppenwolf just a little bit here and talk kind of about that. Once they brought Superman back, Steppenwolf was nothing.
Yeah.
Like, I understand that Superman's a very powerful character. He's one of my favorite characters that the comic book world's ever created, and I get that he's powerful. But to the point where Steppenwolf has been consistently keeping up with Aquaman and Wonder Woman fighting at the same time, and Superman just walks up and just dick slams him. That doesn't make sense.
It's like, why do you need the Justice League at that point?
Yeah, why don't you just have Superman stand in front of everybody going, I'm sorry, guys, I'm just going to punch you in the face, and I'm going to dodge, and you're not going to do anything to me because I'm Superman.
They have this weird story pacing thing where every villain they try to introduce in the storyline so far has to be climactic world destroying, but they haven't gone through the character arcs or the build up to introduce any of those. Like, going to compare this to Marvel again, when they did in Marvel, the first Avengers movie, the steps they had to overcome to defeat the boss was the fact that the group didn't get along very well together, and they couldn't beat Loki. and they finally came together and found some cohesion in their team. And then the bigger bosses that came later on, where they started working together more, and they had to make some sacrifices. And whereas in DC Universe, like in Suicide Squad, they had an impossible to defeat boss, and they just kind of skimmed over it and beat it anyway. And in this movie, they're kind of skipped over the whole cohesion of the team, but they made their enemy too powerful anyway, and then they just kind of pushed Superman in there to the point of where the enemy just fell. Steppenwolf couldn't beat Superman. They just made it too OP to the point where there was no conflict at the end of the movie. Where, in my opinion, the conflict should have arose from trying to get Superman to come back while fighting Steppenwolf. This that should have been Steppenwolf should have feared Superman's involvement, and that should have been like a race to get Superman back before Steppenwolf completes the Mother Cubes.
The motherboard.
See, on one hand, it does ruin this movie, the fact that Steppenwolf just had no chance. But it also kind of helps build up this idea that these villains need to join together in the future. Like, when that eventually happens, it makes more sense as to why they're all actually going to join up. If literally Steppenwolf had no chance against Superman, then that's what's going to make them realize they really need to come together or they're not going to have a shot.
Over me. Right.
But yeah, I actually kind of think about it now. We're doing these comparisons to Avengers and Justice League. I think what would have made the film more interesting is if, say, Steppenwolf had gotten a hold of Superman first, and then you have the conflict between him and Batman. You know, like the whole, you tried to kill me, and it's kind of like overworld. Essentially, Batman having to have his comeuppance and kind of realize his mistakes and reconcile with Superman and try to figure out a way to get Superman on their side. I think would have worked better. It would have made not only Steppenwolf more intimidating and more legitimate of a threat, but also would have made for a much better moment and when the team finally becomes one.
See that? I feel like that would have worked, and that would have worked even better if they had made the reason for blaming Batman more impressive or more standing on its own in Batman v Superman. Because I feel like Batman's guilt for Superman isn't as intense as it's portrayed. It shouldn't be as intense because I don't feel like there was enough reason to blame Batman for that in Batman v Superman. But if that is built on better, I could see that being a very viable option.
Batman was trying to take out Superman in Batman v Superman. That's why Superman is this beacon of hope who's done nothing but good for the world.
Yeah.
And that's why Batman is supposed to feel bad about what happened in Batman v Superman. He's literally just trying to take him out with kryptonite.
Also, doesn't it feel a little confusing? I mean, because again, we talking about story, where we get the fact that obviously Superman should be mad about Batman having tried to kill him and just the whole conflict. But how does, especially since there's no magic, there's nothing kind of like clouding his judgment, how does he get mad at him, really, though? Because at the end of Batman v Superman, they were like, hey, we're a team.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Is like they've stopped being angry. Like I get he died and everything, but really,
I understand Batman tried to kill him, but at the end they teamed up, and I feel like it wasn't Batman's fault that he died at that point. Like, there wasn't enough conflict there. And then when he came back, it was even more confusing because then Superman was back to being very angry with Batman, as if Batman had been the one who killed him.
Well, I think we talked briefly, it's kind of like a Lazarus Pit effect, where he wakes up and he's not in his right state of mind immediately.
Yeah, but at the same time, another thing that really bugged me was the fact that, like, at the end of the movie, we see the coffin, we see the dirt going up.
Yeah.
It makes it seem as though he's going to essentially come back to life himself. And it's just like, in the most strange scene I've ever seen in a comic book film, we've got the Flash and Cyborg digging a dead man's grave, and we've been led to believe by the previous film that that's not necessarily the case. He may not necessarily be dead. He might come back, but it's just kind of like, no, he's deader than dead, and we've got to drag this body.
We've just got to go desecrate a corpse, guys.
We've got to use otherworldly technology to bring back someone, and we don't know if it's going to work.
We've got to assemble the Dragon Balls. We've got to drop them in a pit and have Flash touch them.
It just seems so. Once again, where story is so important, and quite honestly, none of these films have, besides Wonder Woman, have truly gotten that right.
Yeah, world building is very important for when you're trying to make a universe that has a bunch of different characters in it. Building characters and building universes is entirely the point of these movies. And up until this point in Wonder Woman, they haven't been doing a very good job. They did it right in Wonder Woman, and this is very obvious that they're getting better at it after seeing Justice League, but they're not quite there yet, and it's going to leave a bad taste in our mouths when we go to see the rest of these DC movies.
Now, speaking of world building, let's talk about it from the quite literal, real world sense. The numbers have come out today.
96 million?
No, 94 million. Justice League opened to $94 million.
16 million short.
So 16 million short of what they wanted. And to be honest, those numbers have got to be brutal for DC to swallow.
It should be an eye opener. Because wasn't that something we mentioned
Every movie should have been an eye-opener. Their eyes are stapled shut. There's no hope.
Well, like, at this point, this should be an eye-opener, because this was their big opening. This was supposed to one that was like, oh, we're back on track, and now they're still getting hit from their mistakes from before.
This was supposed to be like their big showing out, like, hey, we've arrived, we're on par with Marvel,
Yeah.
we can...
And they're still facing backlash from all of their mistakes beforehand.
I mean, but not only that, it's like... Wonder Woman did better than Justice League.
What was Wonder Woman's opening box office?
It was about $120 million opening weekend, so...
Their projected was
I think
lower
that
than
just goes to
expected.
show that reviews really do make the difference. Like, everyone was going into Wonder Woman opening weekend knowing how good of a movie it was going to be because they'd heard, and everyone was going into Justice League knowing it wasn't really going to be that great of a movie because they'd heard from reviews and from their friends and other things.
And that, again, just comes from the fact that Wonder Woman was a new character they were introducing and they had to build up, so they didn't have to worry too much about their other movies. But Justice League was relying on all of their characters, and they had messed up a lot of those they had done false starts for a lot of those characters, and that came back to hit them hard. That's why the movie didn't play out as well, and that's why a lot of people reviewed it badly.
I think we'll have to wait until Wonder Woman 2 to find out for sure, but it could have just been the fact that there hasn't really been a solo female superhero movie up until Wonder Woman.
Well,
like, that was the first big one. So that could have given it a big boost at the box office, if you think about it.
Yeah, there was also a lot of rhetoric going around about... I don't really want to bring this up, so I'm not going to, actually. But there was a lot of rhetoric going around that boosted it. I was going to just mention feminism, because there was a lot of feminism.
I'm not going to bring it up, he says, and then 2 seconds
You waved your hand at me.
I was very confused.
Yeah, but it was like there was a lot of momentum going around on that movie, not just because it was good, but there was a lot of other momentum that I feel like might have helped it. But again, we're going to, like Josh said, we're going to have to wait for Wonder Woman 2 to see if that was...
I mean, in all reality, to have Wonder Woman do $120 million opening weekend, and then, like, this would be the perfect time to get Justice League out after a huge success like that. The problem was they didn't have a good movie to release.
I feel like that by itself could be its own issue. That doesn't have to tie into another one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean...
I think Josh's point here is that they had, like, the perfect opportunity.
Yeah,
it was the perfect storm for them to make a killing in the box office, and they just chose... Yeah, I kind of think I'd rather shoot myself in the foot, so let's do that.
I mean, we have this bucket. It's got half decent stuff, and let's throw it. I think they were relying too much on that perfect storm of Wonder Woman to make them money rather than actually having the quality in time.
Well, you got to think by the time Wonder Woman came out, this movie was almost done, if not done already.
But I mean, like, at that point, there should have been like, oh, well, Wonder Woman did good. We have a chance now. Let's go back and double take this and make sure.
I mean, they did when Joss took back over, but like, there's just no fixing something that's flawed from the beginning. You can make it as pretty as you possibly can with makeup, but like, you can't fix it.
You can CGI off that mustache all you want.
Yeah, basically.
I mean, this movie, I mean, God, how many reshoots and like corporate interference it had? And it's just kind of like, I mean, the idea that, I mean, Wonder Woman was already a done deal before some of these reshoots were happening anyway. So I think what happened was that they essentially, especially with Suicide Squad, because they reshot the hell out of that movie because they overthought that one too. It was kind of like, hey, these are dark, depressing movies. Let's redo them. And I think what they didn't necessarily get from Wonder Woman was, again, another thing is that they took the source material seriously, and they really embraced the best parts of that character. And I don't necessarily think we had that in Justice League in terms of Justice League is a whole other thing. It's kind of like, the story is still a mess, and there's only so much you can do when you've got two different directors kind of giving out a vision of what this film should be. It's clear as day, the reshoots. They were trying to fix a lot of the problems. They're trying to, at least not structurally, but do minor fixes that I hope that it could be a better film. But ooh boy.
So do we think if eventually Joss Whedon is given the keys to the car for a Justice League 2, do we think, based on what we saw in those good moments, do we think that could be a really good film?
Well, I think Josh is capable of doing that, but I think a lot of it is going to be dependent on their solo movies. Because if they decide to make these characters into people that don't have personalities, you can't suddenly just give them a personality in the Justice League because Joss wants to. You can try, but it's going to be like, I just came from watching Aquaman, and he's just some boring piece of shit. Why is he making jokes now?
When I watched Justice League, the characters not having personality wasn't the problem with the film. I thought that was one thing that was actually okay, were the characters' personalities. It was just
what I mean, but that's what we don't know. That we can't keep flipping back and forth between characters having a personality and then they're not.
Yes. It also relies heavily on what the corporatization wants about it, because that's where they're getting their funding, and they're going to have to. I think they're going to have to realize they're going to have to let
somebody take the wheel that's not Zack Snyder.
Basically, that's what it comes down to.
For me, there are three solutions. One, you need an equivalent to Kevin Feige. I think they have a guy in Jeff Johns who has a fundamental understanding of the characters in DC, and I think corporate has to have the kind of the faith that Bob Iger and Disney has with Kevin Feige. They need to have that same faith with Jeff Johns. And I think if there's anybody in DC, it's probably Jeff Johns has an amazing understanding of these characters. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Brian Michael Bendis now that he's in DC now, and his contributions to Marvel are pretty fundamental. The kind of team dynamics you see in the Avengers right now, that's all his work. Jessica Jones, that's him. They're kind of their take on Spider-Man, same deal. So if he's now made the switch to DC, it'll be interesting to see what affects his writings in the comic books and kind of his effect on the company overall has on what they do in future films. Secondly, you need if you're going to do this DC universe as a universe, you got to figure out what exactly you're doing, because going into the next two films specifically, Aquaman and Wonder Woman 2, we've got one where he's going to be dealing with stuff in Atlantis, far away from whatever is happening with what's happening with the League, what might be happening with Lex Luthor and Deathstroke. And then you have Wonder Woman 2, which is not set in the present day. It's set in the 1980s. So where does this all tie into in regards to the future of the DCEU? We don't know, but if you've got one guy underneath the water and another person whose second film is not even based in present day.
I'm actually concerned about Wonder Woman 2 now that you mention it, because I wasn't thinking about it, but the fights that Batman and Wonder Woman had to add a little bit of conflict into the team in Justice League. He mentions that she hasn't done anything in 100 years, since the first movie. And Batman does his research, so they're trying to typecast themselves into a very tight, very small story where she cannot necessarily do a whole lot.
So
it could be a thing where You never know. It could be like Wonder Woman defeats this villain. It's not really a public thing, but she does defeat this villain that somehow saves the world. And maybe to connect it to the bigger universe, maybe this villain is just like in hiding. She doesn't kill the villain, but it's in hiding, and then eventually it can join the League with Lex Luthor. You never know how they could build it up. I get your concerns that these are kind of...
It's another convoluted kind of thing that's going to further just give them problems down the line.
It's not something they can't write around. Like, it's not an impossible barrier. But
Yeah,
it comes down to whether or not they'll be able to do it, or they'll understand that they have to do it.
100% going to be weird. Like, it's not going to be fluid, I guarantee you. You're going to have to pull yourself out a little bit.
I think it's
because like the whole her
Jeff's
personality was presented as having been torn up for 100 years. She even admitted to not doing anything for 100 years. Like she herself said that. Which like, if you've done something in the 80s, that's like what 40 years ago.
I feel like in regards to RJ's statement, yeah, I think you need to abandon that kind of storyline.
Yeah, it
just
another thing you have to pull yourself away from.
Because if you are, once again, you're going to contradict yourself in films. You don't want to do that. You've already made a kind of a mess already as it is. And I don't think we need another period piece, to be quite honest. I think
one Captain America period piece was enough, and I think one Wonder Woman period piece is enough.
Yeah, because, you don't want to do a movie where it's just like the same jokes. Like, oh my goodness, technology, people.
Oh my goodness, a woman doing things.
Like, yeah, no, you want to move on, and you just kind of like, okay, we're in the present day, as Diana, go about not being the fish out of water and just trying to adjust to normal society. I think that's a story worth telling.
We see her in Justice League working in a museum, so maybe the movie is literally just her working in a museum for 2 hours.
In the 80s this time.
Yeah, in the 80s.
There's going to be some David Bowie and Queen playing in the background. We just get to see Gal Gadot dance for a while.
We're going to have a CGI David Bowie guest star in some part of the movie.
That offends me in so many levels. Don't ever say that again.
Maybe it's just an artsy romance and she doesn't use her powers at all.
That would be like a freaking Logan, just this time without any conflict at all. It's just a bad romance.
Yeah.
I'd actually kill to see that, honestly.
Did you say Logan? Did you call Logan a bad romance? I'm confused by the sentence.
No, I said Logan, but it'd be because I always refer to Logan as a superhero, as a movie that doesn't have to be a superhero movie. It just happens to have superheroes in it.
See, now I'm like, as bad as it would be, as offensive to the character as it is, I think I'd totally be down to see Wonder Woman in a romantic comedy.
See, that's what I mean. As terrible as that would be for the story, I think it'd be kind of hilarious that I'd actually see that. I don't want them to do it, but that's something somebody else should do eventually.
Yeah, they should definitely do it. Just ruin your character. You already fell down the hole. Just go for it.
I think that's more graphic novel territory than...
Speaking of romance, let's talk about the character I loved the most out of the Justice League, and my personal favorite. I think RJ probably agrees with me on this. The Flash was a pretty... apparently I was wrong.
Yeah, Batman's still my boy, dude.
But Flash was probably my favorite character. I did feel like they did a really good job of representing who he was. Not to make more comparisons that are unnecessary, but he kind of feels like their Spider-Man. He feels like the kid who doesn't know what he's doing. He's getting more involved. They did a really good job of portraying that. The actor who does it is very good. I haven't seen the Flash TV series, so I'm not caught up necessarily on what's in it.
I have seen the TV show, so the scenes with with Barry Allen and his father and things like that, that just feels repetitive to me, but that's not the movie's fault per se.
Yeah.
That's because I just saw it in 2 seasons of The Flash. But as far as the scene where he's running and it's in slow-mo and he touches Wonder Woman's sword back to her and then he trips, that was hilarious.
Yeah, really good.
Yeah.
They had a lot of really good speedster scenes at The Flash. Whenever Superman finally gets introduced and they get to see the Flash trying to do his thing where he's running around everybody's slow compared to him, and you just see Superman's eyes start following him because he's super fast and is able to keep up, and you just see Barry's face he's freaking out because he's not used to this. And then you get to see a speedster fight scene between Superman and the Flash, and that was one of the coolest things I think I've seen in a very long time. That was one of the most excellent speedster scenes I've seen, and that's including Days of Future Past. That's including all of Quicksilver's stuff.
Yeah.
And then we get the end credits scene where it's the classic will Superman outrace the Flash. And in my opinion, he probably will at this point because the Flash was too afraid to even go save people in the beginning of the film because he's so young and he's just starting out.
I feel like he doesn't understand all that he's capable of yet. He can't like use the Speed Force to go back in time, for instance.
He's at the point in Flash verse where there's a whole bunch more people faster than him. Like Reverse Flash is still faster than the Flash at this point. I feel like he hasn't trained to the point where would be faster than Superman.
This is one of those. I know the end credit scene was more of a joke than anything else, but I feel like as we mentioned after we saw the movie, they're probably going to refer to it. They're not going to explicitly say who won, but they're going to make a mention of it and cue us into people who watch the end credit scene on who won. And I feel like that's something that is not important as it is, but as funny as it would be, they can later on in the series refer back to that race and have them do another race off, and then they can have the Flash win.
Well, the joke was that the Flash hates brunch because he's awkward, and I feel like we talked about it, they could do a thing similar to the end of Avengers, right?
Shawarma.
Yeah,
Shawarma!
where they're in the shawarma place and they're eating. I feel like they could just open up where. Because the bet was if Superman wins, then they all have to go to brunch, and I feel like
he has to take them to brunch.
If at some point we get to see a scene where they're all sitting at a brunch, I feel like that would really be a good moment.
Yeah, maybe a good throwback without Superman going, remember when I beat you in that race that one time?
If they mention it, it'll actually annoy me, and that'll be a very bad start to the movie. But if they just start with brunch and then ignore it and move on and continue with the story, that'd be a great way. That'd be great writing, and I'd give them so many props to that.
So RJ mentioned that Batman was still his favorite character, where I personally, he was my least favorite character in the film. Batman, to me, they fixed Superman where they had him smiling from time to time as opposed to BVS
character.
and Man of Steel. But they kind of went too far on that end of the spectrum with Batman,
I
where
agree.
there were just too many jokes for a Batman character in one film. He can have 2 or 3 jokes, but it got up to 6 or 7, and I'm like, why is Batman?
They also definitely bleeding.
Yeah,
that was dumb. I'll admit, they didn't write him properly. They didn't do the best stuff with Batman. They just tried to make him into a campy character.
They also didn't do the right.
That's kind of what I mentioned earlier, where you can't keep flipping back and forth between what you want this character to be. You can't have him go from serious and fucking to jokey, and it doesn't make sense. Not for Batman, at the very least. I did not like a lot of the times they portrayed him in this movie. They didn't give him what he was. They didn't make him the tactical mastermind. They just made him kind of their sugar daddy, which was upsetting. But I still love Ben Affleck, and this is not the reason he's my favorite is not because of what he did in this movie. It's what I think he can do and what I think Ben Affleck will do with him because I respect Ben Affleck.
They did the exact opposite issue that they did with Superman, where they overpowered Superman. They underpowered Batman to a point where he was more of a running gag that he was even in the Justice League.
Yeah, he was a suicidal little person.
what are your powers? I'm rich.
I'm rich. It's nothing having to do with the fact that I know virtually every type of hand-to-hand combat ever. I'm a tactician with everything I touch, and I'm a mastermind and a genius. No, I'm just rich.
Yeah, I think when it comes to my Batman, I kind of think I have a 3-joke limit. And then it's just
everything after that's insulting.
Then it's still too much. I think was it towards the end? There's a scene where he's smiling and really happy.
It's when Superman busts in and he starts to beat up Steppenwolf.
He just
and Batman is just like a little kid looking.
He fanboyed really hard. Yeah. It was weird.
In BVS, he literally thought Superman was the end of the world,
and now he's fanboying.
He's giggling like a little kid.
I get being happy to see Superman because his plan worked. He was like, I get to shove this in Wonder Woman's face later. Suck it. But no, he should not have been giggling like a schoolgirl.
He should have smirked at
a smirk at best because he's Batman and the world's still possibly ending and he has to focus.
See, Batman's view of life should be the world is my bitch and I am a super genius. He should be cocky. He should be cocky. He should be
I don't necessarily think cocky is the best word to describe him. I think prepared and ready for anything. And
I feel like that would come off as cocky, especially in his joke scenes should be more cocky than they were. They were definitely kind of offbeat for a Batman character.
I think the tactician part, it's the whole world's greatest detective, not necessarily that he's fully embracing these people, but at the same time, it's just kind of he realized that they're superpowered individuals that can help him, save the day, but kind of have that nice little healthy distance that we kind of see in comic books, specifically the animated series like Justice League and stuff. I think that dynamic really works well, and I'm surprised they didn't kind of use that approach to Bruce Wayne and Batman. But speaking of just the jokes and stuff, I thought the Jesus He's Tall thing was funny. I think that one, like, you could have kept that one and the I think I'm bleeding line. Like, that would have been like.
Honestly, I think I'm bleeding was kind of more upsetting for the character for me than anything else.
Yeah.
That did not seem like something Batman would say, you know?
That's not a.
Batman doesn't show weakness.
Yeah.
except to
Yeah.
Alfred.
It's
Yeah.
tactically
Alfred.
important for him not to show weakness. It's part of his.
If you're going to be a human in the battlefield with these gods,
Gods.
basically, you can't show weakness.
I almost felt it was more like a personal thing between him and Tarkin. Like, I was an asshole. This is me recognizing that I was an asshole. And it's like, yeah, you got me.
That's
I feel
just
like
not something Batman does, though. Like, he doesn't usually recognize when he's an asshole, even though he knows he's an asshole.
I feel like a joke scene could have been done with maybe if he had been talking to Alfred and said something other than that, it would have worked. But I feel like the way they executed it didn't work, especially.
Yeah, it's just kind of like the whole execution of like the outside jokes, I guess is what you're trying to say, right?
Yeah.
All right, guys. I think we're kind of winding down here, so maybe we'll just get everybody's final thoughts and maybe how many stars out of 10 you'd give it. So, Jeff, what did you think?
My scale's a bit harsher on a lot of movies, but 6 out of 10. It was a good, fun movie. I enjoyed seeing it. I'm not sure I'd watch it again, but it was fun to see the first time, and I really hope they learn from their mistakes.
Then we're going to do out of a 10 scale, I'll give it a 5. The dialogue and character interactions were really good. Makes me want to see these guys team up again someday. The way that they introduce characters like Aquaman and The Flash make me excited for their future films. As always, Gal Gadot fucking knocks it out of the park as Wonder Woman, so I'm looking forward to Wonder Woman 2. And they got Superman right. So, hopefully, the rumors of Matthew Vaughn, taking over for Superman sequel are true because, Henry Cavill and him could probably make magic with Superman.
My initial thoughts for the movie were a 6 or a 7, but I like thinking about it like after seeing it for a couple of days ago. Honestly, I'm going to go with 4 or 5 just because I don't like necessarily remember the good things of the movie as much. Like whenever I think of the movie, I don't think of like, oh, that was really good. The good things were just casual and not like you remember all the flaws. You don't remember like the good things of the movie. So 4 or 5.
I'm kind of with RJ. I've come down to a 5 out of 10. I'm a big DC fanboy, but I know how great these DC characters can be, and this just wasn't that for me. So that's my take on it. Thank you all for listening to the first episode of Don't Quit Your Day Job. We'll catch you next time.